East African community is one of the most integrated regional blocs in the world. But internal dispute is threatening the good old EAC.
If we can grow by 2 countries every year. So I'm looking next year for countries like Ethiopia to join, countries like Sudan to join, countries like Eritrea to join, Djibouti to join. All these countries in the Horn of Africa, I want to believe that they can join.
This week on Inside Government, we are talking to the Cabinet Secretary, East African Community, Penina Malonza. She'll be explaining to us what is the future of East African Community and what Kenya is doing to deepen intra-regional trade. Watch the conversation right here on KBC Channel 1 with me, O'Brien Kimani.
How to access KBC Online services via eCitizen. Step 1. On your web browser, search kbc.ecitizen.go.ke. Step 2. Log in using your eCitizen account or create a new eCitizen account and log in. Step 3. Enter your OTP, which will be sent to you via SMS or email. Step 4. Select Matangazo service. Step 5. Read the service instructions. Step 6. Enter your general details. Step 7. Enter your service details and click Complete. Step 8. Submit your application and await feedback from eCitizen. Step 9. Click on Pay and your payment will be made automatically via M-Pesa and your service will be delivered. Step 10. You will then receive an invoice to confirm your payment. For any assistance, reach us on email ecitizen@kbc.co.ke. Telephone number +254 20 22 41 896.
A very good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us here on KBC Channel 1. It is time for BizCheck. My name is Betty Kiptum. Now, over the next 2 hours, we shall be having quite some important conversations. Our first conversation will be on matters sustainable urban development. And to have this conversation in studio with me is Acting Executive Director in charge of the UN Habitat, Dr. Michal Mlinar. Our second conversation will be on matters nuclear energy development, and we shall be talking about the planned construction of a power plant in Kilifi County. What are the risks? What are the potential benefits of that particular power plant? And later on in the conversation, we shall be talking about matters clean energy and how rural households can have better access to clean energy. Over time, during this conversation, we shall also be taking you to the field where our reporters are pitching camp at different functions to just bring you up to date on what is happening across the country. Now we get into that particular first conversation on matters sustainable urban development. Dr. Mlinar, thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning. What is sustainable urban development?
It's maybe a little bit academic from the first sight, but I think all know that the future of the world is urban, meaning more and more people are coming to live in the urban context in our cities. Mm-hmm. So, of course, our focus is to ensure that our life in the cities today and tomorrow is better, that we have an appropriate quality of life and that our cities are socially and environmentally sustainable and well planned.
But that has not been the case so far, has it?
Unfortunately, in many cases it hasn't, and that's indeed the heart of our mandate, where UN Habitat has been assisting national governments, but also local, regional governments and other actors to do proper urban planning, urban design, and to focus on policies that are, as I said, socially and environmentally sustainable in our cities, but also in human settlements in general.
Let's talk about what has been happening so far. The urbanization rate has been increasing, and also the population increase has been, very rapid. So what has this done to cities right now?
Indeed, currently in Kenya, we have about 50% of the population already urbanized, so to say, or living in the urban context, not only in Nairobi itself or in larger cities, but also in smaller and mid-sized cities, because it's also in those places about the provision of the relevant services to the people. So, of course, urbanization is wider than just the focus on the big cities. And the projected rate by 2050 is that it will be up to 70% of Kenyans living in the urban context. So, of course, we need to be focused on, what it will mean for all of us, and how to ensure that indeed Kenyans and, of course, people in many other parts of the world as well have a good quality of life in the urbanizing world.
And how can this be achieved specifically?
Well, it often starts with good urban and housing policies. And indeed, housing is the transformative part of the equation. We often refer to housing as the access issue, because, of course, if we can focus properly on housing, then from that we can start having further conversations about access to water, access to sanitation, but also access to basic services, including education and health. So from a small issue, suddenly things open up to a much broader conversation.
So when you talk about the policy environment, currently urbanization is rising, but the income levels are going lower. So that means there is need for affordable housing, as you've just put it, for the people who are moving to the urban areas. How can the government work towards this goal, especially considering that in Kenya there are affordable housing programs going on?
Indeed, UN Habitat has its headquarters, its global headquarters in Nairobi. So in as far as we have a global mandate, of course, being in Nairobi and in Kenya, we have a special connection, a special affiliation with Kenya, the government of Kenya, but also county governments and other actors. We have two officers working with us on a permanent basis from the Ministry of Housing at UN Habitat, whereby we are indeed on a daily basis focusing on advising Kenya and supporting Kenya in the expertise in the context of ensuring that indeed urbanization is addressed properly, and that the policies, the planning is taking into account the realities of today, but also projections of tomorrow. And here there is a lot of focus also on the future generations, on the young people, and on their needs. And of course, affordable housing is at the very heart of the conversation. So we see that in as far as the need, the demand for housing in Kenya is about 250,000 new units annually. For now, Kenya is getting only about 50,000. So the gap is obviously there, and that's why this issue needs to be properly accelerated. So, of course, our focus is primarily on the policies, but we also support the government and the county governments with some specific projects that can then have a transformative and wider meaning. One particular example is Mavoko, not far from Nairobi or in the outskirts of Nairobi, where we have supported the government with building more than 5,000 new housing units. And in general, of course, there is a lot of focus on ensuring that whatever is done is not in the future somehow causing additional challenges that already now at the planning stage we are well aware of the climate effects that may be happening. We have seen so much recently the effects of the El Nino in Nairobi and the area. So of course we need to focus on those issues as well. But as I said, water, energy, sanitation, education, health, these are all crucial issues. And then, of course, the job markets, the economic environment or the economic ecosystem, and the way people are able to commute from where they live into where they work, maybe bringing the job opportunities indeed closer to the places where they live. And that can also directly or indirectly contribute to slowing down or addressing some of these urbanization challenges.
Mm-hmm. The other bit of urban planning includes the use of the natural resources as well, you know, ensuring that you're building in a way that conserves these natural resources. When you look at Nairobi River, it's almost like a Nairobi, sewer, because it's very dirty and polluted. There are cities that have their rivers running and, they even fish in the cities. Is there any hope for maybe a city like Nairobi whose natural resources have been impacted by the population growth in the city?
You hit the nail on its head, as we say. This is actually one of the areas where we support the government and the Nairobi City County as well. The Nairobi Rivers Project is one of the important areas where we work. But I think we have to start by saying that Kenya indeed has been blessed with natural resources, including potential for solar energy to be generated. Geothermal, of course, is another very important source of energy. I served in this beautiful country before as Balozi wa Slovakia, Kenya, 2012 to 2015, and I had the opportunity to visit many different parts of the country and to engage on some of these issues. So I dare to say that I have a sufficiently good picture about some of these areas. But back to the Nairobi Rivers project, as you know, government has set up the Nairobi Rivers Commission that has been tasked with a comprehensive work on this particular issue. Myself, I have seen the Nairobi rivers, and I have to agree with your description, particularly in the Mathare slum, where we have a youth project that we support. The situation is quite alarming. So indeed, in the planning stage, we have to address all the root causes properly. That includes actually housing, informal settlements, because it's fairly easy to clean up the rivers. It can be done within a couple of weeks, let's say. But if we don't address the root causes, including housing, informal settlements, but also, access for the people, access to jobs and to alternative sources of income, let's say, then we will be failing, or then the solutions will be only partial. So we hope that within the next 2 years we can indeed get some serious results in that context, and that around the Nairobi rivers you can create some municipal parks, or you can create areas for recreation, for sports, and indeed that you can bring new life to the Nairobi rivers and offer to the residents better quality of life also in that context. I'm very excited about that work.
Right, let's hope that comes to pass, yeah? Let's talk about the devolved units. Since devolution came to Kenya, of course, the towns in those counties have been growing very rapidly. What lessons can be learned from the already developed towns, like, the cities like Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu? What lessons can these smaller towns learn as they grow?
Well, as I said, urbanization is very much also about smaller or mid-sized cities, as we refer to them. Mm-hmm. But paradoxically, maybe, urbanization also takes place in rural areas, because it's also about improving quality of life and bringing the services, what we sometimes call urban services, to the people even in the rural areas. And this is very important because Kenya's rural population is indeed its wealth, and in many ways, Kenya's economy is based on the agricultural production, on the food cycles and all that. So even addressing the basic services in the rural areas is an absolutely important issue that can contribute to improving the quality of life for the people where they are, where they are based, even in the rural areas. But it's natural that especially young people are pushing and they are really creating pressure on the cities, whether larger or smaller ones, and the lessons that we have seen in many of the Kenyan mid-size and smaller cities clearly indicate that when you bring the decision making down closer to the people, to where the people live, then you can really address these challenges in a much faster and in a much more sustainable way. So the devolution process has been extremely important and transformational. And again, I served here before at that time in 2013 when the first governors were elected and when they took over. And when the process is started, because this way now resources have been brought closer to the people, and also the representation has been coming closer to the people. The governors, the MCAs, they should be directly accountable to the people that they serve on the local level, and they should design those practical everyday solutions for the residents of Mombasa, of Kisumu, of Eldoret and other places. And we see, I dare to say that we have seen major progress, major improvements. Of course, challenges remain, and for that reason, UN Habitat's work is so important, because we are there to beef up all levels of government in Kenya with the expertise, with the impartial and credible sources of advice and of expertise that we are bringing in the area of sustainable urban development. Because we know that some of the solutions are a little bit more sensitive, and some of the solutions may not necessarily be well understood or very popular among the Wananchi. So, of course, when it comes from a global UN organization like UN Habitat, it can be very helpful to the government, but also to the governors, to, based on data, based on evidence, show to the people that this is the course that needs to be taken in terms of planning, properly balancing the economic activities with the environment, while at the same time also taking into account new challenges such as climate, but also, of course, energy-related issues, and the demographics. Of course, the fact that we have more and more young people, and so we cannot survive without proper education, without good quality education offered to each and every young Kenyan. In order, of course, to increase their chances to be successful in the job market. In the end, then, to be able to afford appropriate housing. And so things are really very closely interlinked.
Yes, clearly so. When you talk about the policy and regulatory environment, I'm sure there are very many policies, beautiful, laws that guide this sector. Sometimes it comes down to the implementation bit. We have seen building plans have been approved, but what is constructed is not, according to the building plans. And it sometimes, unfortunately, ends up in collapsed buildings and, deaths and loss of property. How can we surmount this challenge?
Indeed, we have seen some of those situations. I think now a bit less than before, thank goodness. So I think it is becoming more and more obvious that proper and timely planning is essential. Well, the challenge is that there is sometimes a clash of interest. And we know that the business sector or private companies, they play a key role in the housing sector in particular, because indeed somebody has to build the houses and somebody has to maintain them. So of course it is closely linked to businesses, and we have to have a strong partnership and good conversations with the private sector to have them from the outset as part of the solution, and ensure that, of course, the solutions that we design also take into account their interests, if you will, or that we are sufficiently clear about the space that they are occupying, and if they are part of the solution rather than potentially part of the problem, that's absolutely important. And we have seen and in our conversations with the government that, of course, different incentives that can be offered to the private sector in terms of taxation breaks or in terms of subsidies for affordable housing. This is one of the potential accelerators of this particular area. And of course, there has to be proper regulation. And of course, that regulation also has to be enforced. If somebody doesn't build according to the necessary standards, then of course they cannot continue. They have to be held accountable. But again, I think we have seen increasing awareness and increasing understanding of these important issues, and I hope we are on the right track. We have beefed up at UN Habitat our Kenya Country Program, and recently we have been really able to accelerate our engagement with all levels of governance. One of the governors from Kenya, Honorable Professor Peter Anyanyong, Governor of Kisumu, is also a member of UN Secretary General's Advisory Group on cooperation with local and regional authorities. So you can see that Kenya's devolution process can be, in fact, the experience from it can be useful also for some global conversations, because in general we are promoting better engagement between the member states, the governments, and local and regional authorities. Of course, there is no one-size-fits-all, but Kenya's model is inspirational in many ways, and I think you can be quite proud of the transformation that it has brought to this country.
Urban cities, no doubt, contribute greatly to the greenhouse gas emissions. There's also the other bit of the energy consumption is almost unsustainable, yeah? It's very high. What efforts are going into greening our cities?
An excellent point, and of course we work very hard on solutions in this particular area. If you wanted me to quickly just mention 3 priorities, then you have already heard the number one, housing. Now you have just touched on green cities, or also on environmentally sustainable and of course climate resilient cities. And third issue is localization of the sustainable development goals and cooperation with local and regional authorities that I have already mentioned. So green cities is an absolute must for the future. Again, our cooperation with Governor Sakaja of Nairobi is a good example. We have recently in December signed a protocol on more structured cooperation precisely in these areas, where even in practical terms, in addition to the advisory capacity, we are supporting the city in really being able to take full advantage or capitalize on even small opportunities where municipal parks can be created, or where public space can and should be turned into parks, whether for people just to spend their free time or for children to play. So these solutions are crucial, but of course it has to do a lot with energy as well. You touched on the energy consumption, which remains a challenge. We have seen some blackouts also recently as a result of weather or other challenges. But again, I think you are on the right track in prioritizing more sustainable sources of energy. Of course, solar, but also geothermal. And I will myself be very interested to listen to your next conversation about the nuclear power plant, because in my own country, Slovakia, we have quite a few nuclear power plants, and up to 80% of our total energy consumption is generated in nuclear power plants. But that's a separate conversation, of course. No, we need to cut down on the fossil fuels. That's an absolute must. But I think already a lot is being done here in Kenya. One other, in addition to the Nairobi Rivers project, one other particularly positive example, I believe, of our engagement in Kenya is the Go Blue project, which encompasses the five coastal counties plus Taita Taveta, where we have been assisting the government and the county governments in the numerous areas, capitalizing on the ocean. And of course, addressing also some of the challenges, including waste management and pollution of the ocean, potential overfishing, creating new opportunities, like, for example, teaching fishermen how to take care of fish ponds outside of the traditional ocean context. And other areas, and we have been able to already influence in a positive way lives of more than 10,000 Kenyans in these areas. And of course, the project continues with the support of the European Union and a few European Union members such as Germany, France, Italy, and Portugal.
Of course, achieving sustainable urban development is not a reserve of any country. It has to be a global conversation, right? And the World Urban Forum is coming up in November. Please tell us about that. Absolutely.
Thanks very much for mentioning that. This is a source of our great pride. And Kenya is very much part of the story, because the first World Urban Forum was held back in 2001 in Nairobi. So we started with this concept of bringing together all different types of actors who are somehow involved in these urban discussions together. So this time we are coming back to Africa, a second time in Africa since 2001. So we will meet from the 4th to the 8th of November in Cairo, Egypt, and it will be a super important opportunity to discuss urbanization issues, housing, climate, but also urban crises, because unfortunately we have seen a lot of those recently, man-made or natural disasters related. We are hoping to bring close to 30,000 people, whether ministers, government officials, local and regional government representatives, but also the professional associations, architects, urban planners, but also real estate, private sector actors and others. We are already in touch with the Ministry of Housing here in Kenya, but also with other members of the government, and we hope that Kenya will be very forcefully represented in the political, but also in the professional context. And we will also have a youth assembly that will be part of the World Urban Forum, and we recently discussed with Cabinet Secretary for Youth and Sports, Honorable Nambambwa, that he will himself lead a delegation of Kenyan youth whose voice is absolutely crucial in these conversations. So it will be an important conversation, but we hope with some major impact on how to better foster and shape all these sustainable policies, in particular in Africa. Mm-hmm. And of course, given what is happening in the world today, the unfortunate aggression against Ukraine, and the unfortunate conflict in the Middle East, we have some additional challenges to address, and to also look at how collectively we will then achieve reconstruction and rebuilding of conflict-affected areas, also in many parts of Africa, in the Sahel, or in places like Syria, Yemen, Libya, and many others. Mm-hmm.
Well, we look forward to that particular conversation during the World Urban Forum. I'd like us to discuss the issue of pollution. I mean, it's there to see, the impact of pollution that pollution is having on cities. What steps can be taken to reduce pollution in cities, both from a government perspective and from an individual perspective as well?
Indeed, everybody has a role to play. Mm-hmm. And again, in some of the projects that we have supported in Africa, but also in other parts of the world, we have seen the transformational power of non-governmental organizations and our youth really generating additional push in that particular area. We can all start from ourselves on the local level, whether it is garbage collection or separation and other practical solutions. But of course, the picture would not be complete without addressing the major polluters, including the industry and the businesses. At UN Habitat, we have a special platform which is called World Urban Conversation, where we are involving the business actors in cooperation with us, and in committing to subscribe to certain basic policy steps that of course should be done. So in terms of reducing the emissions, in terms of promoting green and sustainable solutions, and other similar steps. We are focusing in particular also on the construction companies and on the built environment, because as I'm sure you will agree with me, there is a lot of carbon generated in that particular context, and one of the worst situations that we can have or continue having in our cities is that everything is made of concrete, and there is no room left for trees, for grass, but also for water. And indeed, we have seen that we can reduce on concrete. We can reduce on using carbon-heavy materials and methods, and we can indeed do more. So we have a consortium that we work with, both in the United States, in Africa, and in Europe, where we involve the important players in the construction sector, but also real estate actors and others in committing through a charter to decarbonizing the built environment. And this is the next chapter, I would say. This is the way to go for us in the future. And by creating this new, more conducive environment to sustainable and green solutions, I think we are also influencing the minds and the conscience of others in terms of pollution, or in terms of continuing with the ways of life which are no longer sustainable. We can no longer afford to generate uncontrollable amount of waste. We can no longer afford not to separate waste. We can no longer afford to have proper waste processing. And again, this is room also for the private sector, because paradoxically, waste is a source of income and of wealth potentially. We have again seen it, for example, recently in the global project in Taita Taveta, where we have completely been able to regenerate the old dumping site, create a new one, a sustainable one, and have the whole waste processing, waste management chain improved, including creating some job opportunities, in particular for young women in the waste processing and separation.
Right.
So this is the way to go.
I like that you've mentioned the issue of waste processing. There are some cities or countries that have got it right. Clearly, Nairobi and Kenya, especially the Kenyan urban centers, are still struggling with this. Dump sites all over the place. Very little is happening in terms of recycling and processing of that waste. What can we do? What can we do to solve this situation?
Again, we need to have an important conversation of all different levels of governance and design solutions accordingly. We have seen some good results of that already. For example, the case that I mentioned from Taita Taveta, but there is a lot more to be done because, you have been a trailblazer in banning plastic bags, and I do remember very well my good friend, the former CS of Environment, Professor Judy Makungu, when she initiated that. It was not easy. It was potentially even controversial, but this is the way forward for sure. And I think with some appropriate activism and some appropriate focus and energy, even the whole waste management context can be changed. We need to do better on waste separation because it's no longer sustainable to put all the waste together in the way we see it often. And Then again, as I said, the dumping sites need to be first, of course, regenerated, and then, where possible, kept where they are. But of course, upgraded to the next level, so that the processing and separation is appropriately done. Or where we see situations where it's no longer feasible, like in the context or in the relation to the Nairobi rivers, then of course we have to look for sites which are done in different locations. And again, there is another important area of our work, which is land management and land tenure, which is crucial for housing, but it's also crucial for waste management. Part of our portfolio is the global land management network, where we can also offer to Kenya different positive experiences from other countries where they have managed to coordinate properly on the local but also on the national level the land context, of course with housing on one hand, but also with waste management on the other.
Right. So as we come to a close of this conversation, I'd like to get your closing remarks, specifically on the future of urban living.
Well, as I said in the beginning, our future is urban. And I don't think we should feel scared about that. We should embrace the urban future, even with its challenges, as a key transformational opportunity. Because yes, we now see that up to 70% of Kenya's population, for example, will be urbanized. Up to 70% of carbon production will also be happening in the cities. And yet, 80% of the GDP is generated in the cities. So it comes with opportunities, and it is our collective responsibility to take good advantage of those opportunities and to make things right. And UN Habitat is the strongest of partners for Kenyans to achieve just that, to have those opportunities make you shine also in these important areas of sustainable development. And I would like to invite everybody to also check our social media channels, UN Habitat, whether on Twitter or X or on other social media channels, but also our website, www.unhabitat.org, where many of these solutions and many of these policies are articulated. And of course, we look forward to engaging with many of your viewers.
Awesome. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thanks very much.
That is Dr. Michal Mlinar. Dr. Michal Mlinar is the Acting Executive Director in charge of the UN Habitat, and we have been talking about sustainable urban development, the journey towards ensuring that our cities are remaining sustainable even as they develop further and more people move from rural to the urban areas. That is the first conversation of BizCheck this morning. We want to take a quick break. When we come back, the conversation about nuclear energy production in Kenya begins. Do stay with us.
At the Isuzu East Africa ground, formerly General Motors, along Nairobi-Mombasa Road. The company has operated in the country for close to 40 years, churning out close to 6,000 vehicles annually.
So welcome to Isuzu East Africa. This is where we produce Isuzu. This is a home for Isuzu. We are basically assembling all the Isuzus you see on the road in Kenya from here, starting from pickups, light commercial trucks, to the medium-duty trucks. We call them the N series. And then we have some other heavy-duty trucks from 10 tons all the way to 26 tons. We call them the F-series. The Isuzu East Africa actually serves not just Kenya, but also Uganda, Tanzania markets. Those are the key markets.
You're known for the D-Maxes, you're known for the Isuzu trucks, you're known for the buses, institutions, schools.
Yes.
How many units do you manufacture here every year?
So every day we are doing about 30 units every day.
We are here to go behind the scenes of the process of assembling the popular Isuzu FRR 10-ton truck.
This is the highest selling brand in Kenya, selling over 2,000 vehicles a year. Preferred for especially the construction industry, can hold 200 bags of cement. You have a hardware, you see an FRR, it's in the agriculture sector.
Just like with any assembly line, the process begins at the material handling center. Here, all materials necessary are sorted out.
Many parts are sourced from outside.
Yeah.
There are some locally made
Absolutely.
materials that go into the vehicles and the trucks that you manufacture.
Yes, absolutely. They are good items there. There are quite a number. Batteries, leaf springs, seats, floor mats, metal brackets, and others.
From here, the material inventory, which makes up the production plan, are later taken to the body shop where the whole production takes place.
The body panels, they come as also completely knocked down form. So you can see the floor is separate from the roof. There is some level of sub-assembly done on the roof. Some reinforcement plates are welded on this jig. But once that sub-assembly is done, then now we go to the main framing jig. This jig is what helps us to keep the dimensional accuracy. So you can see the team, what they are doing is we load the panels to the jig and clamp them into position. We started with the floor, then we did the side panels. Now that's the back panel we are doing. We'll later on do the front panel and the roof panel. We clamp into position and then we do spot welding. So the equipment you're seeing, the yellow equipment there is a spot welding guns that now that we use for the joinery process for the metal panels.
The cabin is next taken to the paint shop.
So we have quality control in every section. So we inspect, verify it's okay, then we allow it to go to paint shop.
Here, Isuzu has one-of-a-kind electro-deposition plant. And its cost?
This is how $500 million looks like. But ED, what we are doing is we are applying the initial primer coat using electricity, electro deposition process, so that the entire cabin, we dip it in a bath of electrolyte, we pass current, and then the paint is uniformly spread on the surface of the cabin.
After the paint job, the cabin is cured in an oven for 20 minutes. Here the temperatures are scorching to ensure retention of the paint. After the cabin cools, it is given the main paint job.
If a customer doesn't want a white truck,
yeah, we're able to arrange for that too. We develop paints. All we need to do is get the order before production. So with our sales team, we're able to do that even for, we've seen KBF, Coca-Cola, NYS, all those police with special colors. Any of those customers, or even yourself, you come and say you want an orange. So we just work with you.
Here it's a hive of activity as technicians rush to ensure they produce 30 trucks a day. The newly painted cabin now is ready for interior fittings. Next, the windshield is carefully installed.
So we will start with some primer application. That's the body primer. And then on the windshield itself, we shall put some sealant around and then we install. The power tools you hear around are used to compress air.
still using conserving energy and everything.
Absolutely, yeah. It's compressed air is preferred in the auto industry.
The cabin is now fully complete after undergoing quality checks and is mounted on a chassis. The engine, which is one of the imported components, is assembled and also merged with the chassis. The FRR is almost complete, but before its first ignition, all the fluids crucial to any engine are poured in the engine. The engine rev could signal the truck is complete and ready to hit the road, but not yet. The next spot is the dynamic testing center where the vehicle undergoes a variety of tests.
We're testing the vehicle is now working. It's dynamic, it's running. You run the vehicle, you actually make it run.
More or less like the final inspection.
Yes. So we run the vehicle on this equipment. We simulate the road environment. So here we're able to run the vehicle up to 80 kilometers per hour.
Including a shower test, and here they really make it rain.
If there's any drop of water, then that we should go back for review and a problem solving.
Later on, according to the customer's need, the truck is fabricated to suit the taste, varying from public service vehicle by that used by organizations. Staff at this busy plant say how work is like in the factory.
Having worked here, we meet quality standards, and Isuzu, we see Isuzu products around everywhere. The buses we ride in are Isuzu, the trucks you see carrying most of our goods are Isuzu. So for a fact, I can tell people that Isuzu is the best product to acquire, really.
We were recognized by the Federation of Kenya Employers as the overall winner of the 2023 Employer of the Year Awards. This award just signifies the kind of working environment that we have here at Isuzu.
Isuzu is also leveraging on technology and artificial intelligence, AI, as the world switches to electronic vehicles.
We have process innovations, and also there are product innovations that are coming up. So the process innovations I've shown in the material handling system, where we have an electronic pull system. This productivity and quality control system is also our own innovation. This system is custom made for Isuzu East Africa.
May of 2023, Isuzu East Africa unveiled a special edition of Eliud 159 Isuzu D-Max in honor of the two-time Olympic marathon champion Eliud Kipchoge.
We identified with Eliud many years, not just recently. We've been with him for a couple of years, and we identified him as our brand ambassador. And with time we've worked with him, he's been able to win many awards. This brand is a limited edition. It's not, we are only selling 159 units.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed your visit here. Thank you for coming.
For the process, I'm Ben Troy Njue.
Thank you for staying with us. This is BizCheck. My name is Betty Kiptum. Now, we want to have a conversation on matters nuclear energy production in Kenya, and the government plans to inject about 4,000 megawatts to the national grid by 2034 from nuclear power. The Kilifi County and Kwale have been earmarked for construction of power plants, and the one that will be constructed soon, if the process fails, is the Kilifi power plant. And we just want to have a conversation with Laura Muniafu, who is a sustainable energy management expert, as well as Joyce Keingati, who is a community action for nature conservation expert. Of course, we are informed that there have been some issues from the Kilifi County residents, of course, seeking to understand the impact of this particular project to the environment and to their livelihoods. And we just want to understand what are those concerns, and if they should, or rather, prevent the implementation of the project. Thank you very much, ladies, for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, 500 billion shilling nuclear plant set for construction in Kilifi County. Concerns have been raised, yeah? I would first of all like to hear from you, Laura, how we got here.
How we got here.
Right.
No, I think one of the things we have to recognize, we as a country have made commendable strides when it comes to our commitment to renewable energy, or rather to the energy transition. When people are preparing for the energy transition, I think we are currently right in the middle of the transition because we're actually implementing clean energy sources. And it's very commendable to see that 90% of our energy comes from clean energy sources, being geothermal, solar, wind, and hydro. And it's so interesting that even as we think about nuclear, you have to recognize that nuclear energy is one of the clean energy sources. So in terms of us sticking true to our commitment of clean energy, we have stayed true to the cause. One of the things that you have to realize is, I know the question is there a need to develop nuclear energy now? And the reality is, as long as there's going to be a growing demand, there's always going to be a need to generate power that will meet that demand. And you don't generate power now, you start planning before. That's the value of having energy demand planners. And we have to recognize that not just here, but also within the continent, the population is growing significantly. It is expected that there is about 600 million people living in urban centers or cities, and that's going to double within the next 30 years, as we heard from the previous guest. In fact, it is expected that almost 70% of the population here in Kenya is going to be living in urban centers. And that means there's going to be a growing need for the critical infrastructure, being energy, transport, and water. So when it comes to the transport, the energy scenario, it's very important to envision a variety of advanced events and create and choose technology which is resilient for those kinds of adverse events. And I think that's the value of taking into consideration a fairly stable source of power such as nuclear energy. Secondly, putting up infrastructure, I think they've been doing quite a bit of work since 2010, which makes sense in terms of putting up infrastructure takes out time. There's a lot of time that is required to do the groundwork, whether it's community engagement, social license to operate, getting the land to be able to build the power plant, and also getting the permits. So I think it's good enough in terms of the work that has been done as we prepare to have our first nuclear energy power plant in 2034.
Right. Laura Muniafu, conservationist. What are your thoughts on this?
Thank you very much. As my colleague has said, the need for energy will keep on growing as long as the population is increasing. Mm-hmm. But coming from a conservation point of view and really representing the communities on the ground that we work with, especially in Kilifi area, where it is one of the areas that has been earmarked, specifically in Uyombo, we feel that it is not the right move to make, considering the area that has been proposed. We could say it's a biodiversity haven. We have the Watamu Marine Park on one side, which is harbors a lot of biodiversity. We have the Arabuko Sokoke forest, where the community derive their livelihoods, where biodiversity is conserved, and the area basically is a UNESCO bioreserve. We have communities like small-scale fisheries communities who rely on the ocean, on the fisheries that are derived from the ocean to get their livelihood. We have the mangrove forest along the creek, the Mida Creek, and the conservation groups, which derive their livelihood from these natural resources. So at the end of it all, when we look at the conservation efforts that have been put in place to conserve the area, or rather to keep the area intact, we feel that having a plant in such a place is not good at all. So, and taking into consideration the communities who are there on the ground, who have been there since time immemorial, I would say that having a nuclear power plant there is not good at all. So from that background, thank you.
Joyce, as you listen to Laura speaking, of course, this is not secret information. It's out there that this area has very rich biodiversity.
Yeah.
So in the project planning phase, how is it done in a way that the biodiversity in the area will not be affected by, the construction of this plant and the production of the nuclear power there?
Okay. That's a fantastic question. I think there's a bit of work that NUPEA is still doing. It has started the initial work by creating the strategic environmental and social assessment, which I think there's one that was recently published, and there's still a bit more work where they'll need to do further site characterizations, and then of course the attendant requirements of doing the environmental impact assessments. So in terms of them settling specifically on that site, I think there's quite a bit of work. It's one of the sites which they have selected based off the criteria, the broad criteria that there's a low population, it's next to a large water body, and also the ground. It's fairly stable there. They could have looked at Turkana, they could have looked at Nyanza, they could have looked at all the sides of the regions. But just based off that criteria, I think Turkana is closely linked to the Rift Valley, and same as Lake Victoria, so those were not necessarily the viable sites. Okay. In terms of Kilifi being, it's still a site that has not been definitive. There's still further work that they actually need to do to make, in terms of site characterizations, to actually say that this is actually where we're going to put this up.
All right, so just hold that thought there. We would like to take a quick break to pay our bills. When we come back, this conversation continues.
mtoto wangu, pindi unapokuwa unazungumza, basi ongea na sauti ambayo kwamba ni ya kiupole kabisa, usipige mayoye. Na pia ukitembea, tembea mwendo wa kisawasawa wa wastani, usitembea ule mwendo ambao kwamba mtu anajiona mimi ndio mimi, unioni vile nimevaa. Hapana, anamtahadharisha mtoto wake, anamfundisha tabia nzuri.
Tunapaswa pia kukumbushana mema na kukatazana maovu, kwa sababu ni adab.
Thank you for watching KBC Channel 1. This is BizCheck. We want to take you now to the KICC, where the government spokesperson Isaac Mwaura is having his weekly briefing. Let's listen into what he has to say.
Because of issues of immigration from Somalia and such other places, then you can see this case, Kenya has been affected again. However, the government has swiftly responded by activating the National Public Health Emergency Operations Center and the constitution of an incident management system with the subcommittees with their regular coordination meetings at the Ministry of Health. In an effort to further fight this outbreak, the government has conducted 3 rounds of supplementary immunization activity, in brackets SIA, that's what they are known as, with 7,683,235 children already covered in the counties of Garissa, Kiambu, Nairobi, Kajiado, Mandera, Wajir, Garissa, Tana River, Kitui, Lamu, and Machakos counties. The 3rd round, targeting the high-risk counties of Mandera, Wajir, and Garissa, which have been postponed in the past following destruction of infrastructure by the El Nino rains, have now resumed this week, targeting 993,458 children. We don't want our children to get this disease, and as you know very well, polio leads to disability. And this is a way to ensure that we reduce this. In fact, majority of a good number of persons with disabilities, especially those who are physically disabled, are as a result of actually polio. So it's a very important campaign. We have also enhanced surveillance at the national and county levels, and currently the government is doing collection of environmental samples twice a month in Garissa County, cross-border surveillance in border counties, and training on integrated disease surveillance and response in the counties that we have mentioned, so that this cannot be escalated. Secondly, on the issue of Rift Valley fever outbreak, the government has received a confirmed report of RVF in North Horr, Marsabit County, with ongoing investigations to identify additional cases and assess the extent of the outbreak. The outbreak is attributed to the recent El Nino rains, which led to a surge in mosquito population, thus an increased transmission of vector-borne diseases. All counties, therefore, are now put on very high alert for potential spread of this disease. As you know very well, this affects our livestock a lot. The public is further advised to avoid handling and consumption of uninspected meat, to use protective equipment when handling animal births, discard animal stillbirths, and carcasses should be disposed of immediately. Individuals experiencing a fever are advised to visit the nearest health facility for assessment. The government has also distributed over 1.2 million insecticide-treated mosquito nets across the country, and members of the public are advised to use them. As you may be aware, we distributed quite a bit of these mosquito nets during the El Nino emergency, many of them. The Ministry of Health, under the Directorate of Veterinary Services and the county governments, we are working closely to monitor the situation and enhance disease surveillance. The third outbreak is on the red eye disease in the coastal regions, and we have the report as follows. The government takes note of the outbreak of the red eye disease in the coastal region, specifically in the counties of Mombasa, Lamu, and Malindi. Few cases have also been reported in other parts of the country, 1 in Kisii and 3 in Nairobi County. The disease is spread by touching eyes of infected persons or contaminated surfaces, then one touching their eyes. This disease, characterized by red, watery eyes, has been identified as a form of conjunctivitis, which is highly contagious, but generally not severe in nature. So it is contagious but not severe. Please note that. It is therefore important to emphasize that these conditions are usually self-limiting and rarely causes long-term complications to the eye, and therefore needs not to cause high alarm. So people should not panic because of that. Members of the public are therefore advised to frequently wash their hands and keep off touching their faces, disinfect high-touch surfaces, and don't share personal items like towels. For those affected, I don't know how that would work in a homestead. They are self-advised to self-isolate to reduce spread. So don't use your towels. I think that, I don't know, should apply also to a husband and wife. Those with mild symptoms are advised to use a wet face towel over their eyes, and persons with severe symptoms, which include redness, discharge, swelling, and bleeding, should seek urgent medical attention. So that is to the extent that we are speaking about health. So if you are a health journalist, we come to that point. Let me now turn to agriculture, enhancing agricultural productivity and prosperity. Our country's GDP growth last year was majorly supported by a rebound of agricultural activities that had earlier contracted because of the long drought season. And you know, people mocked us when we were praying for rains. God heard our prayers. The Kenya Kwanza administration continues with our intentional subsidization of production against consumption. Additionally, we are working on the guaranteed minimum return as promised in our manifesto by supporting our farmers through giving them access to affordable credit. Affordable credit. And let me go straight into that because it's a key issue. On the issue of the agricultural finance corporation, there has been a misunderstanding when it comes to reporting by the media. And so I would like to take this opportunity to actually state as follows.
That is the government spokesperson Isaac Maurat there addressing the press on his weekly briefing, speaking about a number of issues, including the polio vaccination that is ongoing in the northern and the northern Kenya counties, as well as some coastal counties. And of course, there is a push to ensure that the young people are not affected by polio. Remember that for the northern Kenya counties, the age has been expanded from 0 to 5 years to 0 to 15 years. So be sure to get vaccinated. He has also talked about the red eye disease, and he says that it is highly contagious, but there is no need to worry because it is not severe, and given a few guidelines in terms of how to ensure that you are not affected, including the constant washing of hands. So that did not stop with COVID-19. It continues to this day. Please do that. Now we come back to studio and continue with our conversation on matters nuclear energy development. In studio is Laura Muniafu, sustainable energy management expert, as well as Joyce Keingati, who is a nature conservationist. Thank you very much, ladies, for staying with me. Before we took the break, we were talking about the concerns that the community has in terms of the biodiversity that that Joyce had mentioned. And Laura, you were telling us about just the steps that are taken in the pre-planning phase, to ensure that this biodiversity is maintained. Please go ahead with your point.
Thank you once again. I think one of the things that's very important is to just recognize that there's quite a bit of work that's been done, a bit of groundwork that is preparing towards putting up this power plant. First of all, we have to recognize that even for Kenya to be given the green light, this is one of the highly regulated sectors world over by the International Energy and Atomic Agency. So there's certain conventions that are required to ensure the safeguarding of the environment, as well as just ensuring safety and security, which also look at early warning and assistance in the event of an accident, and also the proper waste management and disposal. And so to that regard, the work that has started has been the strategic environmental and social assessment that has already been carried out by NUPER. And of course, there will be subsequent attendant work that will have to be done in terms of having comprehensive environmental impact assessments, which need to be put in place before the project is even approved for construction. So there's a bit of groundwork that has started, and just to mention, just over and above that, I think another thing that's very, very important, that is, even as they're having the CESA and the environmental impact assessments, it's very important to recognize that we need to have adequate public participation. It is important for the simple reason that some huge energy infrastructure projects sometimes have actually had to come to a halt because there's not adequate public participation, especially when it came to the EIA. Good examples are the Lamu coal energy power plant that was to be put in place, which unfortunately had to be shelved because there's not adequate public participation when it came to the EIA. So I would encourage NUPER to actually be transparent in terms of the communication, and also just ensure that they actually do the most when it comes to engaging the public to allay their fears.
Mm-hmm. Joyce, as NUPER is carrying out all these public participation forums, what is the feeling of the locals in terms of the efficiency of the public participation forums, and also public information, ensuring that the public have the information they need to make sober decisions?
All right, thank you very much. So as my colleague has said, public participation is really important, and many a times we have seen that public participation is where people just come up in a forum and tell people that a certain program is coming, a certain development is coming. The one way, the very first stage of public participation or community engagement or stakeholder engagement, which is informing. So as she has said, it is important for NUPER to really conduct really good public participation, or let's say community engagement or stakeholder engagement, because down there with the communities, first of all, they do not understand what this thing is all about. When you talk about nuclear program, when you talk about the nuclear power plant, it is a very green area for them. So the understanding of this whole thing is actually not vested in them. Secondly, when it comes to engagement, there are very various levels of engagement. The very first one is informing people that something is coming, for them to actually know and get this information. Then there is the second aspect of consultation, where after information, there's the feedback, where the people really get to give the feedback in terms of how do they feel about these developments, in terms of the impacts that are to be foreseen, how do they feel about them. And the consultation moves further to embed this feedback into the development and improving, maybe the design of the project at all. So I'd say that there's a lot to be done when it comes to public participation and community engagement. There's a lot to be done when it comes to capacity and sharing of information when it comes to this whole nuclear power and the nuclear power program. And basically for the people to understand, so that when it comes to making a decision whether they would like this project to be in that area, because at the end of the day, the community has, or the citizens of the country have the sovereign power. So they need to have the information so that they can make an informed decision, so that we can have that we call social license or social acceptance of a project. So there's so much to be done, and I'd say adequate public participation has not been achieved.
Has not been achieved.
Yeah.
Laura, how can we ensure that both parties, are happy at the end of this process? And is that even a possibility?
In terms of, just please elaborate.
The residents of the area that the plant is supposed to be constructed, they're complaining about the biodiversity, loss of source of income, their ancestral homes and all that. At the same time, the government wants to ensure that this project, sails through. So how can we reach to a point of concession where both parties are happy and the project kicks off as intended?
No, that's a very interesting question, and I think it's always a very difficult and tough balance that any, running from the decision maker has to make in terms of is it for the good of the project? Are we securing energy futures for our country, for the short, medium, and the long term? But the way I say it, I believe that this is not necessarily a bad project. We are looking at the growing demand, or rather the growing population, and based off that, we always will have to have a healthy and diverse energy mix. I had mentioned something around adverse events. And they're becoming more and more common based off the fact that we have climate change, adverse weather events from drought, famine, and floods. And when you look at those adverse events, if you're considering, say, hydro, I think there's only very few places that now we can either start putting up dams anymore. So hydro over some time will no longer be plausible option for a future energy source. Then when you look at solar and wind, it also has its limitations unless we can be able to advance some of the technologies such as battery energy storage and technology, which is a fairly novel technology and a fairly costly technology. So if you're trying to look at a clean energy source of power and one that is also fairly stable and can give you huge amounts of power, I think nuclear is one of the considerations that can be taken into play. And the thing that we have to recognize is, I know most people are usually looking at the big nuclear power plants that are actually, they require space, or rather they would take up a space of maybe an 8-kilometer radius. That's going to be demanding a huge chunk of land. But the consideration that Kenya is taking into play is one that is fairly efficient in terms of the size. They are looking at the compact technologies that are there, the small nuclear reactors, which tend to be relatively costly, relatively cheaper than the conventional nuclear energy power plants. And also they tend to be take up less land. So if you're looking at the numbers right now for the kind of power plant that they're looking at, in fact, even the pilot one, I think it is considered as going to take up, the one that they're looking at in Konza City is going to take up about 34 acres of land, which if you were to consider like a solar power plant that was going to produce the same amount of power, it would take a considerably bigger amount of land. You'd be looking at maybe 10 times the acreage, or even actually thousands of acres, or even wind. That would be the same kind of consideration. So if you're looking at that kind of consideration, I think nuclear in terms of efficiency tends to be much more a much better option. In terms of the concerns, definitely there'll always be concerns around the biodiversity, and definitely to allay those things you need to have what we already mentioned, the comprehensive impact assessments to assure and also adequate public participation to ensure that you have the community buy-in, that you also take into account that the people's perspectives in terms of the kind of measures that you're proposing to mitigate the potential risks, and also just giving people that comfort that you're going to ensure preservation of their biodiversity. But like I mentioned, in terms of adverse events, incidences that have happened in the past, out of the around 400 nuclear reactors world over, there's only been 3 significant events. So if you were to do that ratio in terms of the number of incidence rates or number, of the risk, you realize that it's fairly low compared to like the incidences you'd observe when it comes to hydro, or the incidences that you observe in wind and solar.
All right. I'd like to get your thoughts on what she said, especially in terms of the risks that are involved for the community.
Thank you very much. Well, risks will always be there. And for the community, and coming from a conservation point of view, we are very heavy in preserving the environment. We are very passionate in preserving and taking care of the environment. Negative impacts when it comes to radioactive waste that is generated out of the nuclear reactors. How will the disposal be made? We're struggling with waste, domestic waste as a country, So sometimes you ask yourself, so what about the radioactive waste? When it comes to displacement of people, where are they going to be made? Sometimes we've heard of instances of I'd say unjust displacement, or displacement that was not done in the right way, resettlement rather. When it comes to the loss of livelihood, when you put people from one place to another, are you assured that they're going to continue with their way of life? What happens to that? When it comes to issues of culture, what happens to that? So I'd say it is important that we outweigh these impacts and really ask ourselves, really, do we really need this form of energy right now as a country, as much as the country is gearing up and putting the preparatory measures, the laws, the conventions to ratify the technical and expertise to operate and maintain the plant. So it is really a key question to ask ourselves, do we really need nuclear power. As she has talked about, that it is one of the forms of energy that is really clean, yes, because of its low carbon footprint. But the disaster, I mean, it is felt for a lot of years. You know, the Fukushima incident, we're still feeling the disaster right now. So it is really a critical question to ask ourselves and to really interrogate before we really decide to take that next step.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies. I think I wish we had more time. This is a conversation that cannot really end any soon. So thank you for your thoughts. I will take those as your closing remarks. We have been talking about nuclear energy development. Laura Munyafo, Sustainable Energy Management Expert, as well as Joyce Keingati, Community Action for Nature Conservationist. Thank you very much for your thoughts, ladies. We want to take you now to your University of Nairobi, where there is a management change over there. The new Vice Chancellor is speaking currently. Let's listen into that.
Like you, judged on my accents. So, Monica, I'm very keen to listen to students because when I was in Makueni a couple of months ago, there was a woman, like the choir here, they invited me. I had this ceremonial marriage. And she said, there is no shortcut to the top of a palm tree. We all have to put in our hard work, and that's what I'm going to do. Thank you very much indeed. So I think Monica is taking over the program, as students should take over the program. Please, Monica. Maybe a little bit more here, closer to the students. You want to take it out? And that was what it was. Please be seated.
Thank you for staying with BizCheck. Now we want to have a conversation still on matters energy, but on matters rural, the rural people accessing clean energy. And to have this conversation is William Mulehi, who is a principal in charge of business consulting and research at Intellicap. About 90% of rural Kenya uses biomass as its main source of fuel, which includes wood and charcoal, and that has had adverse effects on health issues, on health matters rather of the users. We want to just know the journey towards ensuring that people in the rural areas are accessing clean energy, and what challenges are faced even as we continue to make sure that there is access to clean energy in the rural areas. Thank you very much, William, for speaking with us.
Okay, thank you.
Karibu sana. Could you give us a background on where we are at in terms of rural Kenya and energy access?
Okay, thank you very much. I think when we start talking about renewable energy and access to renewable energy for especially the underserved and unserved populations, I think the figures that we've been having over the last 5 or 6 years, in terms of the number of people who we should be electrifying, we are looking at about 624 million. people to be electrified by 2030. And now this takes a lot of effort, from the private sector, from development partners, who are all sort of like channeling different energies and different ways of trying to support private sector to access some of these markets. And specifically, I think looking at the rural population, we are looking at about just over 700 million people who do not have access to, this energy.
Globally?
Yes, globally.
Right.
And I think specifically looking at about 300 million people who are in areas or rural areas which are nascent to this particular energy, but they still do not have that access to power. And I think looking specifically within Africa, we are looking at about maybe about 50 to 60% of them being in Africa, so spread out across the continent. And so those are some of the efforts that I think we need to start looking at, both as private sector as well as the government, in terms of how do we provide a bit more access for this particular population.
And what are the challenges that these people face in terms of they don't have access to clean energy? So this lack of access, what are the challenges that come with it?
So the challenges are quite diverse. So this, it spans both from the consumer perspective, as well as the enterprises that are being able to access to provide this renewable energy. So looking at some of the challenges, and I think most recently we've seen is the shilling depreciation against the world currencies, which has a ripple effect in terms of how much these systems go for, and then again, of course, that feeds back to affordability of the people who are actually supposed to be purchasing this. Then another challenge I think we can talk about is access to capital, and again, capital from this perspective would be from both the enterprise perspective as well as the consumer perspective. So sometimes trying to access these really rural markets can be a challenge to a lot of the private sector companies, because the population is very sparsely populated, and so when it comes to marketing costs, promotion costs, those are quite high, because you'll find people are sort of like congested in one small area, then the next one in a distant sort of part. So it becomes very expensive for these organizations to be successful in terms of delivering this energy. And then I think another challenge we could be talking about is the incentives. So what are the incentives that some of these enterprises are going through? Again, just looking at financial support sometimes may not be it. So one there is of course the financial aspect of it, but also looking at there's more that goes to it even before you go to the market. So trying to look at, for example, if you're having challenges in terms of accessing this, so what sort of technical support would you be required to, or would they be able to access? Aside from just being the capital. And then again, just going back to what I just talked about, the distribution costs, which also proves like to become a challenge. But also for that, again, it's the affordability of these systems to the local population. I know there are some organizations that have run results-based financing that sort of like helps the rural folks be able to actually be able to afford this. A lot of the companies are also doing what you call the pay-as-you-go service, and again, this sort of like reduces the initial or the capital cost when it comes to purchasing these solar home systems, for example, or these off-grid systems. And so that is a good way in terms of how to go about it, but again, there's still a bit of work that needs to go into it, because especially if you're looking at like the period between the COVID period, a lot of people lost their jobs, they lost their livelihoods, and of course that affects their ability and willingness to pay. So they may want to pay for this particular service, but they're not able to afford it. But again, some companies, some private sector companies that were doing the distribution of, for example, the solar home systems, they were able to extend, let's say like maybe 2 or 3 months of the customer not paying, but they still are able to access this energy. So those are just some of the high-level challenges that we'll be talking about.
Let's delve more into the balancing bit in terms of it's high cost. It's a high cost venture to deliver to this populace. But at the same time, they don't have, high income levels that they can afford very expensive gadgets or equipment to access this energy. So what can be done, or rather as an investor, how do you find that balance?
So that's an interesting question. I think trying to, as I mentioned just right now, one of the things that these private sector companies are doing is having it like as a pay-as-you-go. So you don't actually purchase the equipment on a one-off payment. Maybe you pay like an initial deposit, maybe like 20 or 30%, and then the balance of it is paid over a period of time. So that sort of like eases the pressure on the consumer being able to access this power. And then another thing, as these private sector companies, as they observe the repayment model of each customer, then they are able to say, to look and say, okay, this particular customer has been consistent, maybe paying over the next 1 year or so. And so maybe they would be able to access now bigger or larger system. Because, for example, if you're talking about solar home systems, there's, the basic one that just has like maybe 1 or 2 lights, and then maybe a radio or a torch. And then now there are other bigger systems, which of course now are, far from the reach of a lot of these local populations in the rural, underserved and unserved populations. So looking at their income levels and how this is going, then they would be able to maybe sort of like trade in the smaller systems that they have for a bigger system that maybe has, for example, like a TV, or it maybe comes with a refrigerator, and then again that also sort of like has a ripple effect, because a positive ripple effect actually, because once they are able to upgrade, then you see maybe especially for the rural folk, they are able now to maybe sell maybe like cold beverages. So that that sort of like gives you an edge over your competitors, especially in the hot, maybe like northern parts of Kenya. So they're able to sell that. Some of them are also able to offer mobile phone charging at a fee. So that sort of like has a ripple effect, a positive ripple effect in terms of growing their income.
So for the rural population, one of the issues that the uptake faces is, apart from the costing point, there's the issue of the cultural, the mindset that needs to be changed. I mean, if you're going to convince me to go from firewood, which I access right here, to some more expensive energy source, what does it take to convince the rural populace to move to these cleaner options? Okay,
that's a good point, and it's something that I think we've also experienced, working with a lot of these private sector companies. There's usually a lot of mindset change that needs to go into it. So that's why most of these companies, what they do is that there's a lot of market activation where they come. Let's say like during the market days, they set up their equipment, they are able to test it, so the consumers are able to come and see what benefit would this be in terms of them being able to access to use these particular systems. And so again, just trying to sensitize them in terms of the benefit, because as you say, using firewood for lighting is not a very healthy option. So it comes with respiratory challenges, respiratory problems. There's a lot of smoke, which also affects especially if you have kids. And so so a lot of sensitization goes in even before you actually come in and say this is the product that we're actually going to be able to sustain. And so so those are just some of the things that we would be able to look at in terms of how are you able to position this particular product in a way that is going to be beneficial to the consumers. So a lot of sensitization is actually needed, and then of course this also feeds into the support that, for example, the local government would be able to come in. So again, most of these local rural areas, you have to go through maybe like the local area chief or a community leader or community elder. So it starts from that point, and then they would be able now to help you, sort of like be your, let me call them free marketers for the particular products. So that's the approach.
Right. Coming up with solutions for this sector needs a lot of innovation, and the issues that one sector faces, the populace in rural Kenya faces in one area might not be the same as another area within the same country or even within the same region. So when innovators are coming up with solutions, what is the importance of local-based solutions?
Yes, local-based solutions, as you rightly put it, it's something that addresses the particular community in which they're coming into. So, for example, if you're looking at maybe not using Kenya as an example, maybe another market, maybe like in West Africa, which there are a lot of younger markets compared to markets across Eastern Africa. So you need to be able to really see, one, you need to conduct an assessment in terms of affordability and willingness to pay for the consumers. So you need to be able to say, okay, this is the product that we want to bring into this market. You conduct maybe a quick survey just to try and understand, okay, is this community able to afford this, because everyone would want power. Everyone wants to have a TV in their house. Everyone wants to be able to switch on your lights at night, security-wise. But there's now the issue of cost, and now that's where a lot of R&D for these companies is really needed. The research and development, trying to understand the market, and then post that, now you're able to provide a product that actually speaks to this particular market. So, for example, I think in some of the areas that we've worked, we are able to see people, so a company would come and say, maybe we have this product that is going to be able to, power maybe a fridge or something, but maybe that's not what their immediate need is. Maybe the immediate need is actually to be able to, security, especially for post-conflict or really rural areas where security is an issue. And so sometimes even just by having that one light at your door, that will already deter, potential thieves coming. So it really needs to speak to the market that the company is trying to access. Yeah.
Let's talk more about the benefits. You've mentioned the issue of maybe security and that one light changing the lives of a number of people in the village. What are the benefits of ensuring that everybody has access to clean energy?
The benefits are quite a number. If we're looking at, even from a health perspective, just as we had talked about, a lot of respiratory diseases emanate from the fact that most of these people are using kerosene or using firewood for lighting, for cooking as well, which, has its own negative effects in terms of the health. So that's one of the benefits of, having this clean and sustainable energy. Looking at, as I mentioned again, increased security. Because a lot of these rural areas, because of darkness, so they are prone to, attacks from maybe other communities or rather just normal thieves. Again, and a lot of these systems, they're not just the lighting system. So it's a package that comes maybe with, for example, like a radio, like a TV, and based on that now, consumers are able to access more information. They're able to sort of be in touch with, what is happening. So current affairs, they're able to, switch on their radio and hear what is happening, hear what the government is talking about. So there's also that sort of like awareness when it comes to access to energy. So there's access to information. And then I think one of the key things, which I think maybe we should have even started with, is the increased potential income. So a lot of these systems spanning from, let's say, like for the smaller, let's say, smaller solar home systems, which are looking at maybe you have like a phone charging, so you're able to offer that as a service to maybe your neighbors. You're able to access, let's say, like a TV. So there are those ones that would be able to, have sort of like entertainment joints where people can come and watch maybe football, maybe on weekends, and they are able to now maybe charge these neighbors of theirs to come and actually access this information. And so those are some of the sort of like key benefits that we'd be looking at. And then again, I think something that's very key and a challenge to a lot of these rural areas is the fact that once it's darkness, you're not able to continue your business. And so if you have this lighting, if you have this solar home system lights, you'll be able to, maybe carry on your business into the night, which of course has a ripple effect in terms of increased income to the family. Yeah. So those are just some of the sort of like high level key benefits that we'll be talking about.
Right. Of course, for uptake to increase, there has to be, as you said, some incentives from the government. What are your views in terms of the current incentives in this industry?
If we are looking at incentives, I think we are able to see quite a number of them because, looking at the Lighting Global report of 2022, we're looking at, at an investment that is going into renewable energy of over $2 billion US. And this is now as of 2022. So I'm sure by now this has been growing because a lot of these these private sector companies, these foreign FDIs, the foreign direct investors, are seeing that this market actually does have a potential. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of investment that is going into that. There's a lot of investment that's going into, and this capital is being used basically for research and development, being able to offer bigger and better systems at a more affordable rate. So being able to, provide that sort of support. There's also the aspect of technical assistance support, because a lot of these businesses, and especially the ones that are working in rural areas, need a lot of hand-holding, aside from even before you actually give them finances. So looking at what are some of the setups that they already have, what are some of the structures that they already have. And now from there, you'll be able to say, okay, maybe they're asking, let's say, like they're looking for support of maybe $500,000 US, for example. Mm-hmm. But even before providing them with that particular financing, they need to have sort of like structures in place that will be able to properly manage these finances. And I know a lot of the smaller indigenous local companies, that is a lot of where they struggle with. And that's why you see a lot of foreign companies coming to open up shop in a lot of these markets, and they prosper. Mm-hmm. Because, of course, one, they have the financial muscle, they have their structures in place, and they are able to now even attract this investment that comes in from various development partners. So I think those are just some of the key things that we sort of need to also look at.
Right. So when you're talking to an investor who is looking to enter into this industry, what would you tell them?
One, I think they need to really do their market research very well, mm-hmm. Because there's no really market that's similar. I mean, looking at markets like Kenya, you can't compare a market like Kenya with a market like, for example, Tanzania. Looking maybe outward, the markets like in East Africa are generally a bit more stronger than markets in West Africa or in Southern Africa. Mm-hmm. The uptake, the level of electrification by the government is also higher in these particular markets. So those are just some of the things that one needs to do. You need to also conduct a lot of market assessments to understand what your market needs, and see how best you're able to address that. And then I think another thing that would be, of course, quite useful for these organizations is to ensure that the necessary structures are in place. The necessarily, if we are looking at maybe like operations, sales and marketing, having the right team. So there's a lot of background work that needs to go even before you actually, set up this company to deliver that.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your thoughts. I'll have to take those as your closing remarks, William. We are out of time. That is William Mulehi. He is a principal in charge of business consulting and research at Intellicap, and we have been talking about how to ensure that the rural Kenya is accessing clean energy. I would like now to leave you with the Defense Cabinet Secretary Aden Duale, who is speaking at the launch of the National Peace Support Operations by the Kenya Defense Forces at Kahawa Garrison in Nairobi. Let's listen into that.
And by setting aside a substantial initial capital outlay, we are not just pledging our support for peace, we are actively investing in it. It is our considered view that the gains derived from investing in peace cannot be gainsaid. Every mission our troops have undertaken, whether under regional mechanism or within the framework of the United Nations, recoups to us in the form of stronger allies, safer borders, and a flourishing economy. In this regard, the fund will allow us to elevate our role on the international stage, bolster our economic prospects, and promote our international cooperation. In the fulfillment of our international commitments to peace and security, and with this fund in place, we are ensuring that our defense forces can rapidly deploy with the right equipment and competency in a changing security. As we forge ahead, I call upon the fund administrator, Secretariat, to of the resources in order to guarantee success in the mandate implementation. This fund represents more than just a financial allocation. It embodies our pledge and our citizens that Kenya will Excellency, the President and the Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Forces, the Cabinet Committee of
Waswahili siku zote wanasema, kwa nini tuandike na mate ilhali wino upo, vitabu vipo na kalamu zipo?
Enyi wema wanafunzi, na wapaje mashauri, kukimbilia mapenzi kwenye shule ni hatari.
Vijana wengi wanapotea na kupotoka kwa ule mapenzi yao ya vitu vya dunia na vitu vya haraka. Lakini akijihusisha na mambo kama ya ukulima, utaweza kulima, kuvuna na uweze kufurahia mazao yako.
Sikatai kuna vyuo vikuu kama JKUAT, ila vijana hao wanakosa zile pesa za kuwafikisha hapo JKUAT ili waweze kusomea kuhusu kilimo hicho.
Wanafunzi
mtoto wangu, pindi unapokuwa unazungumza, basi ongea na sauti ambayo kwamba ni ya kiupole kabisa, usipige mayoye. Na pia ukitembea, tembea mwendo wa kisawasawa wa wastani, usitembea ule mwendo ambao kwamba mtu anajiona mimi ndio mimi, unioni vile nimevaa. Hapana, anamtahadharisha mtoto wake, anamfundisha tabia nzuri.
Tunapaswa pia kukumbushana mema na kukatazana maovu, kwa sababu ni ada baina